Good morning and welcome to the meeting of the Executive Member for Economy and Strategic Planning. I'm Councillor Andrew Waller, and we'll just take through the agenda as printed. So in terms of agenda item 1, declarations of interest, all my declarations are on the Council Register of Interest, and there's nothing that's new for today. Item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, the 23rd of March. I approve those, and I'll sign those when we're back in the office. Agenda item 3, public participation. I understand that there aren't any members of the public registered to speak. Louise, can you confirm that?
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor.
Oh, Joseph, thank you very much. However, I did get a specific question in relation to consultation with Bishop Hill, so officers will be covering that within the discussions. So that brings us on to agenda item 4, which is the engagement strategy, economic strategy, skills plan, and My City Centre. So Simon, do you want to start off, and then we'll come to the other officers?
Thank you very much, Councillor Waller. Yes, so this is a paper which brings together a number of strands of work, and also needs to be seen in the context of the paper that went to executive last week around broader issues around engagement. As you'll see, there are a number of pieces of work that we want to pick up and develop our engagement with over the coming months. And indeed, there are other pieces of work beyond this as well. And this is very much wrapped together into a council-wide engagement strategy, which Claire Fole will touch on in a second. The work also builds on the approach that we've been developing over the last year in terms of our broader engagement with the business community. And it is very much a piece of work which is being done in the York Way. Like to take the chance to once again thank the Federation of Small Business, the Business Improvement District, the Institute of Directors, the Chamber of Commerce, Indie York and Make It York for all the work that they've done with us over the last year in terms of getting the message out to the business community and making sure that what we do actually responds to what people need on the ground. So say what you'll hear the detail for in a moment also builds on that. And I think what we've managed to achieve over the last year, not least in terms of the work that's been done to reopen the city centre and get trade happening successfully in York, and demonstrates why our York way of doing things is the right way to do it. So I'd like to pass him in the first instance on to Claire, who will talk through the broader details on the engagement strategy, and then Alex Dockery will talk about the economic strategy and skills plan engagement, and then Andy Kerr and team will pick up the detail around My City Centre. Claire.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. So the resident engagement strategy was approved by executive last Thursday, and it takes a joined up, measured approach to resident engagement. Simply put, over the summer, we've got a huge range of different engagement activities taking place, all different multiple access points into a singular conversation, which is really about how residents, business owners, commuters, employees live and work in York. And the things we're particularly interested in is trying to understand the opportunities, the constraints, aspirations, and barriers to prevent people living sustainable and fulfilled lives in York, to help inform the economic strategy, the carbon reduction plan and the local transport plan, all coming together at the end of the year in the autumn, with different thematic engagement plans coming from the singular resident engagement strategy, which Andy and Alex will be talking about today. So if I hand over to Alex first, talking about economic, and then Andy will pick up on city centre. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Claire, and thanks, Councillor Waller, for the opportunity to speak to you about the plans for engagement on economic strategy. So I guess at the starting point, our approach to engagement will seek to place residents and businesses at the heart of plans to build an inclusive economy, making sure that growth in York is both fairer and greener. And in seeking to achieve these ambitions, we will do three things. Firstly, we will secure engagement with a cross-section of York's population, including all communities of identity and socio-economic groups, to make sure that the process is inclusive. We want to deepen our understanding of the different factors which influence employment choices and aspirations, as Claire's already mentioned, so we can support residents to get higher paid, flexible 21st century jobs. And also we want to secure engagement for all of York's economic sectors, ensuring that small and independent businesses are also well represented. And here, through our business engagement, we want to understand the perceptions and opportunities of York as a place to do business. We want to understand the changing requirements that businesses have for space, infrastructure, skills and workforce. And finally, what also are their support requirements for recovery and longer term growth as well. And that also includes green growth, recognising how important that is to our aspirations of the city, making sure that we address the climate emergency. So the annex to the report sets out our engagement plan in detail. And in summary, our approach will include 3 stages of citywide engagement and consultation. And this is really reflects best practice that's emerging from the LGA in this as well. So the first approach is what we're calling Inform, and there we will deliver a communications campaign across York that lets all audiences know that we're quite keen to hear their views and promoting the strategy engagement process through case studies, animation, social media, polling, and other conversational communication tactics. So that's really a way in for residents and businesses to access the engagement. The first stage is what we're calling Consult. So we're going to be using a public attitude survey to understand the public perception of working in York, doing business in the city, skills, pay, quality of life, together with links to transport and the green economy, making sure we're linking in with other engagement activity happening across the city at this time. And this will, like I say, form an integrated part of the evidence gathering for both our work on economic strategy, but also the local transport plan and the forthcoming carbon reduction action plan. And as I've already mentioned and Claire's mentioned, this online survey will be supplemented with multiple entry points, targeting different audiences and their values and starting position. The second stage will be what we're calling Inform and Involve. So there we'll be undertaking targeted engagement sessions such as sector roundtables, which we've held in the past, and they've worked really well in understanding business issues and really talking through some of the kind of trade-offs and balances that need to be considered when dealing with quite complicated issues in some cases. And there'll also be workshops comprised of community groups, partners, and also target audiences based around demographics. And there's also the opportunity for Facebook Live Q&As, focusing on themes or particular areas that we need to kind of drill a bit further down under the detail. And then the third stage is what we're calling Consult and Refine. So again, this will be a citywide consultation as an opportunity to comment and refine the draft economic strategy. This will also act as a further opportunity to inform and consult, or inform the consultation and refine the stages for the local transport plan and also the carbon reduction action plan as they're going through the development process as well. So hopefully, as you can see through these plans, we're taking quite an ambitious and inclusive approach to engagement to make sure that we really develop a people-centred economic strategy and skills plan. And clearly, you know, over the last year, our direct relationship with our communities and businesses has helped York to keep COVID-19 infection rates low and make sure that businesses get the support that they need. And we want to build on those relationships to make sure that we build that inclusive economic strategy that can support longer term growth in the city. So just in terms of timescales then, so engagement activity for us will look to commence in late May and run until October 2021 with a new economic strategy brought back to the Council's executive for sign off in December. And obviously we'll be undertaking various progress updates to yourself, Councillor Waller, for your decision sessions. So that really concludes an update on our engagement plans on economic strategy. More than happy to hand over now to Andy and Ben on My City Centre.
Thanks, Alex. So My City Centre is a stakeholder and public engagement project effectively to help shape a long-term vision for the city centre. That'll guide future strategies and plans such as Local Transport Plan 4, the economic strategy that Alex has just been discussing, and it'll also help us to set our future investment priorities for the city centre and ensure the ongoing vibrancy, and obviously particularly responding to a post-pandemic world and the impacts that will have had. This project actually started in 2020. It was a project that was in train at that point in time, but was paused due to the pandemic. We just started the public engagement and a lot of the face-to-face engagement, and COVID hit, and it meant that we had to put a complete pause. It wasn't the right time to be setting that vision in the sort of emergency response phase that we were in at that point in time, and obviously public engagement was more challenging. But this is the right time to relaunch it now. We'll be looking to build on the engagement responses we received pre the pause in 2020 and review those and see whether the responses that we received up to that point are still relevant. But we'll also be looking to filter this through the challenges that COVID's presented, but also the opportunities that are emerging for the city centre and some of the trends that will have speeded up and give us the opportunity to be really bold and flexible to try and help us shape that future economic recovery. So we've amended some of the scope and themes subtly to respond to the pandemic, and we've agreed those with the My City Centre stakeholder group, who are formed to help steer this project alongside the public engagement. And then we'll be recommencing the public engagement in May, using many of the methods that has just been set out by Alex. Obviously, we're filtering this all now through the scope of the work that Claire has set out. So we're having that one consistent conversation with the public and with stakeholders. We're looking to recommence that in May and to take a draft vision back out to the public around July, August time, refine that vision based on that feedback, and then we'll be bringing it back to the executive in September for approval. Just to pick up on an email received pre today's session that Councillor Waller mentioned earlier, there was a query from Councillor Kilbane about why on some of the previous engagement we'd done, which is set out in one of the annexes to this report, there was a bit of a gap around the Bishop Hill area and whether that related to a lack of engagement with that community. Ben, who's the project manager for the project, do you want to just come in, Ben, and just set out just clarify that I think, the email we sent? Yeah,
just for the purposes of the meeting, this relates to page 72. It's the map there, sorry. So Ben, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Waller. Yeah, so yeah, just around the detail of that. So the map that you've just referred to on page 72 of the report pack relates to an online map tool that we had in that first round of consultation in 2020. So this was a tool which people could engage with to register parts of the city that they were particularly pleased about or particularly unhappy about in terms of wanting change, etc. So there's a lot of thumbs up and thumbs down icons across that map, but what they relate to is the space that people are responding to, as opposed to their physical location of where they live or where they occupy the city centre, etc. So that's maybe caused a bit of confusion, which we'll seek to address moving forward. And just in terms of the general sort of engagement approach, we're really keen to target residents both in the city centre and the wider area who maybe avoid the city centre or use it in particular ways. So last time around, we engaged initially in a fairly broad brush way, using online means and our city, etc. And then we were looking to focus in and look to specific communities of interest or geographies or demographies which were maybe underrepresented. But we obviously had to pause because of the pandemic. We didn't quite reach that stage, but clearly this time around, we'll be looking to do that as we evolve that engagement. And if there are gaps in that engagement approach, then we'll seek to target residents or occupiers or visitors in those respects.
Thank you. And then the skills plan. Consultation.
Okay, yeah, I'm not on mute, so I just wanted to check. What we've got for you, Councillor Waller, is an update on where the process is in developing both the one-year skills plan and also the 10-year skills strategy, which has been a partnership approach through the Skills and Employment Board and a specific task and finish group of that board. The paper outlines the progress that is being made on putting that plan in place, and good progress is being made, and also the range of consultation and engagement with stakeholders that's taken place to ensure that the skills plan represents an inclusive approach and a partnership approach to ensuring that this is an owned strategy across the city and actually then delivers the outcomes that all of us are wanting to see. I'm going to hand over to Alison so she can pick out any specific points.
Councillor, in terms of the engagement approach, because I think that's the point you want me to highlight. In conjunction to the first paper, where you hear economic strategy, think that's synonymous with skills plan. The only exception is where we identify some real deep dive or targeted skills work that is needed. We will still be cognizant of, and we will obviously engage with colleagues in this one voice approach, but actually we might drive that from the task and finish group and the skills board to really make sure that we get what we need from that perspective, or in the timescales that we're requiring for the development of the strategy.
Thank you. I just have some generic points to make, and that's that accepting that COVID has meant that a lot of consultations have converged onto this summer, and appreciating that the public don't want to be repeatedly asked about different aspects, and I think it's important to make sure that all of these things are joined together. The points that I wanted to cover was the need for regular updates, but also to recognise that not everybody is on Facebook or Twitter, and therefore there is a requirement in my own mind that we demonstrate that residents who are not on social media can participate, can have their voice heard, and that's something that I would expect each team to demonstrate, that whilst there's a lot of engagement these days through that methodology, through IT, that there's also a backup for people who don't engage that way, but they're not missing out. And equally that each team demonstrates that it's not the usual suspects who have their voices heard, but a wide range. And I think that it's something that's come through all of the roundtable work that's been done, that many of the micro businesses within the city who cumulatively employ a significant proportion of employees in the city, they had previously not have been as well engaged with the council and LEP as previously, and I think that we're in a position now that we know these people better and that they know us, and we should utilise that as a way forward. And I think certainly having just come from the retail forum, there's a lot of interest in the My City Centre, and a lot of ideas post-COVID in terms of build back better. So there's certainly an appetite for that, and equally with skills. I'd say with the skills agenda, ensuring that younger people's voices, not just those who teach young people, but actually the young people themselves get a hearing, and that their situation and their need to start a career with experience, they're not caught in catch-22 situations where they can't get a job because they haven't had the experience, and there's very little opportunity to gain that. So I think that's a hurdle that we need to demonstrate that we're getting through. But so with the addition in the recommendations of regular feedback to the executive member, which you'd all included in your description. So that's the addition that I would put in there, Joseph, just for agreeing the recommendation. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. We will take on board the points you've made about voice, Councillor Waller, and particularly looking at the angle of young people's voice, because obviously we do a lot of voice and advocacy work with young people, and it's an opportunity to begin to feed that into the various engagements we've got with them over the coming months.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks for all those presentations. So that takes us on to agenda item 5, which is the skills strategy update. Page 107.
So moving on to the detail from what Maxine provided as the overview, we have been working through the Skills and Employment Board, which, as you'll recall, comprises of representatives from employers, employees, education, the council and local enterprise partnership representatives. They have been driving the work of both the 1-year skills plan and the 10-year skills strategy. And they've been doing that through regular monthly meetings, 5 since its inception, and also through working with a task and finish group, of which both myself and Simon sit on, and is chaired by an education partner. But as we've already mentioned, the voice of employer is key and has not only influenced work to date, but will continue to do so. There's an update on the 1-year plan. As you'll recall, that was approved at your meeting last month. And since then, we've been working in partnership with both employers, other key stakeholders across the city to develop 4 priority projects. And they are detailed in the paper at paragraph 12. They're very much around setting the foundations for improved partnerships and skills infrastructure across the city, at the same time as helping people now, very much around supporting in communities, businesses, and providing where we can easy access to the skills provision that's available and coming on stream. What you'll also know is that 2 of those projects have been identified as potentially community renewal fund bids, and we've got partners looking to bring those forward. And then, as we've mentioned, we've already had some key engagement with businesses, and we will continue to build on that. Linking back to the paper we've just talked about, there are things identified where we might want particular sector focus on skills, such as rail, for instance, or there might be the green agenda that we want to tackle in a slightly different way. So as the task and finish group, we are currently pulling together kind of what that would look like and what might need to be done in addition to what's already been set out in the paper you've just heard about. I think the key thing is that we're really grateful for the time of these stakeholders, and that's also true of the elected member input to date. We had the joint scrutiny, we've had questions and representation through these sessions, and again we're proposing to follow that up with another joint scrutiny in September.
Yes, that was a point I was going to raise, that I think it's important that there is another of those sessions, so that both of the 2 scrutiny committees that cover this area, but also that there's the opportunity for partnership groups that aren't on the board to feel that they are part of the process. So it's a broader engagement and scrutiny process. So I'm grateful for the work that's gone into all of this, which has been done at a rather difficult time. But there's been a lot that has been developed, and bearing in mind the need to respond to the economic changes that many people find themselves in. So with the addition that I request that officers engage with another scrutiny, combined scrutiny meeting to fit in with the development of this plan, so that that feeds in to the process, as indeed the joint scrutiny fed into the 1-year plan. So that's I approve with the additional recommendation.
Thank you.
That paper, and that brings us on to agenda item 6, apprenticeships update.
Yeah, the update paper that you've got, Councillor Waller, actually gives you an overview of the work that's been done by the Impartial Apprenticeship Hub, over the last year, and also the use of the apprenticeship opportunities within CYC, both to support new workforce, but more importantly to develop our existing workforce, the skills within our existing workforce. And also an update on the work that's taking place to ensure that the levy transfer process is fully known about and is operating well within the city. What we're seeing through the work of the Impartial Apprenticeship Hub is that their profile has been raised over the last few months as they've been working on engagement events across social media and also arranging virtual events to ensure that particularly young people are aware of the opportunities open to them. We are seeing a COVID impact at the moment for young people, and that is because they've experienced 2 years of disrupted education. Many of them are wanting to stay within education post 16, and all our school sixth forms and our FE providers have seen an uptick in terms of applications this year. And we think that is because that young people are using it as an opportunity to seize at something that's certain for them. So they're staying within the education routes a little bit longer. What we do want to do, though, is through our impartial careers advice and guidance, ensure that young people are well sighted on the opportunities that apprenticeships can give them, in addition to the routes that they know through formal education. We're also as well going to be keeping a very close eye on those young people who may well have opted to continue in formal education, but then change their decision in the autumn term, and to ensure that we are signposting them very proactively towards some of the opportunities that they could get from the apprenticeship route in the city, and that they're put onto the right opportunities as quickly as possible if they find that what they've opted for in terms of A level is not quite what they expected. We're seeing definite improvements in our use our use of the apprenticeship levy internally. So since September 2020, 22 apprenticeships have been commenced in CYC, and this is despite the disruptions caused by the COVID pandemic, and there are 34 active apprenticeships in the existing workforce. And what we're seeing is managers who are increasingly starting to appreciate the opportunities that the apprenticeship routes give them, both in terms of recruiting to vacancies, but also upskilling existing workforce. And we're seeing both things begin to grow in popularity internally, particularly around succession planning around skills, where we're seeing colleagues leaving CYC. And we're seeing both those things coming through in the applications that we're getting in the apprenticeship strategy group, which I chair internally. So applications are very definitely increasing. Internally, understanding of the apprenticeship routes is improving, and the close working between the skills team and the apprenticeship colleagues within HR is helping to really increase that understanding of the value of apprenticeships internally. That's leading to a decrease in the expired funds month on month. And that's also another positive sign, the way in which our approach to apprenticeships is becoming better known across the council. That will also feed into the work that we're doing around levy transfer. And in common with most public sector organisations, we now have our levy transfer process up and running, and we've received our first application around levy transfer. That's likely to grow, we're fairly sure, over the coming months, because we're learning from those local authorities who've had their levy transfer up and running earlier than us, and we're learning from some of the mistakes that they've made around that, so that we do feel we've now got a very secure process in place that will help us to grow this opportunity over the coming months. Alison, have you got anything that you want to add?
I think just to highlight some of the external activities. So in terms of the work of the Impartial Hub, we also kind of monitor the market and actually what's happening in the city for people of all ages for apprenticeships and all levels. And whilst that paper talks about the low of 20 vacancies per week in a 15-mile radius after the very first lockdown, and we managed to, in the city, they've kind of increased back up to around 60. As of yesterday, we're at 90 vacancies in a 15-mile radius of York. So I just wanted to share that because that's some real positive news. And we cast that far and wide to around 470 people that have signed up for our weekly apprenticeship bulletin through our social media channels. So we really are trying to connect people with the opportunities that are live now. And equally, Maxine touched on some of the events that we've held recently during National Apprenticeship Week, and also our annual recruitment event, which we turned virtual. And again, we connected people with the 26 live partner employer vacancies at that time.
Thank you very much for that, and I appreciate the work that has gone into making sure that more of the apprentice levy is utilised, and that companies that we can transfer to the supply chain are benefiting from this. And I have written to the Minister asking for more flexibility on the utilisation of the apprentice levy, which is a view that other businesses around the city hold, that if it was possible to utilise that for the apprentice salary, then it would all be fully utilised. And I think at this current time would enable many young people to gain experience. But thank you for what you're doing to ensure that we have increasing apprenticeship numbers at what is not an easy time to be doing it, both in terms of COVID and in the impact it's been having on the council's finances. So thank you very much for that. So happy to agree the recommendation with the addition of a 6-monthly update to demonstrate the additional work that will be done by the team. Okay, thank you very much for that. That brings us on to agenda item 7, which is the Housing, Communities and Local Government Committee inquiry into permitted development rights, which Becky, you're going to lead on.
Okay. On the 23rd of March this year, the Housing, Communities and Local Government Committee launched an inquiry to examine the government's approach to permitted development rights. As part of this, there were 8 questions that were asked specific questions. It focused on major developments and the recent changes, for example, on office to residential, and what kind of impacts they have had on the quality and quantity of new housing, including affordable and social housing. It also talked about the infrastructure and about the ability of local authorities to plan development and shape local communities. Our response is quite detailed in parts, but as a summary, it says that it has had a negative impact in terms of affordable housing because permitted development rights don't allow us to request any form of contribution for affordable housing. So there's a significant loss in that. It also outlines specifically how many units have gone through without actually requiring planning permission, which is a significant number. And again, the negative impacts that have had. So in conclusion, it says that we're not supportive of the new changes to permitted development rights. They do have a significant detrimental impact in terms of the impact on the city centre, in terms of affordable housing contribution, and to be able to properly plan development. So the recommendation is that I would suggest we send this paper to the inquiry with your approval, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky, for this paper. I'm keen that we engage with consultations. The previous ones have been government-led consultations on changes to the planning process. This is actually a select committee response to all of the changes, and I think it worth making sure that our voice is heard in that. I'm conscious that there have been a lot of discussions at Planning Committee over the recent past, which relate to this subject area. It would be I'd be interested to know the steps that we're taking to help in the change of the city centre, particularly the large floor plate shops, and the move to subdivide those into the size of retail premises that seem to be more in keeping with the future of retail, and also how we can help with that regeneration process.
Yeah, these don't necessarily help us with that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a recommendation from full council that we look at permitted development rights and potentially an Article 4, which is something that we are progressing. But in terms of the floor plates of the retail use, that's something as a planning department we can work with colleagues and external parties to give advice wherever possible in terms of what they'd want to see and how we can help with that. But in terms of the PD rights, there's not a lot we can do at the moment, unfortunately.
I appreciate that, but I think it worth drawing out what we are doing at the moment with the permissions that we do have as an authority to place shape, and to recognise the importance within the conservation historic city centre core and other conservation areas within the city to have development which is sympathetic to what makes York special, and that we retain that. So thank you for the detailed response, and I'm happy for that to go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, that brings us to item 8, which is urgent business. I don't have any, and therefore I bring the meeting to a close. Thank you all for your attendance.